Welcome into a new BuffStampede Radio out of Munsterteiger, publisher of BuffStampede.com, joined by fan correspondent Tyler Ziskin. Tyler, it's been a little while. We did get out to golf not too long ago. Less than a month till the big day. How's everything coming together for you and Amy?
It's busy right now for sure. It's coming along though. Most of the big stuff is finalized. So beyond that, I think we're pretty much good to go.
All right. What else is new with you? Are you getting out there to play a lot of golf?
Yeah, definitely. Too much.
There's never too much golf.
One of the benefits and negatives of not having a job is definitely the amount of golf I've been playing. There's too much when you're trying to pay for a wedding. So
that's true. That's true.
Definitely had a few eyes from Amy where she's like, I think that's enough for this week, sir.
Well, we obviously had some bad news recently here with the Pac-12 postponing fall and winter sports until 2021. We're going to do a little segment called Buy or Sell. I think this is on PTI, or is this what show is
Buy or Sell is PTI? Yeah.
Okay.
PTI.
So,
or actually, no, I think it might be Around the Horn.
Around the Horn. Okay.
Yeah.
Buy or sell, Tyler. The Pac-12 made the right decision in postponing the college football season.
I'll buy it, but I mean, I guess I know this is what I'm supposed to say, but I see both sides of the argument. I think if they do it and something goes wrong, the league will never recover. I know I would say that the odds of that aren't great, but yeah, I mean, I think you have to protect yourself in some capacity. And at the end of the day, you're looking out for these kids, and these kids aren't adults. I think that's really what separates, well, I guess adults, yes, but you know what I mean? They're not professionals, I guess is the right word.
Yeah.
It's a different ball game than NBA or NFL, where these are professional athletes and they're going to make their own personal choices and they get compensated for what they do and that kind of stuff. Now, we don't need to go into the debate about scholarships and all that. I think that's another argument that has good arguments on both sides. But to me, it's just, if something does go wrong, it's going to be a disaster. And I think if people actually come together and put together an actual plan, there's a way that spring football can work and they could make things doable. But obviously it's a frustrating and a difficult situation.
Yeah, I struggled with this one. And if you look at it from CU's perspective, they've put themselves in a position to be able to compete this fall. 3 weeks without a positive test. And you can make an argument being in a structured environment is safer than these guys not being within kind of a regimented situation going forward. But I'm gonna simply buy this one because CU can't just play against themselves. And right now, today, August 17th, was supposed to be the start of preseason camp for Pac-12 schools. And right now in California, with the restrictions they have, they can't lift weights inside. They can't gather in groups, and they can't touch a football. So I get why the Pac-12 had to make that really, really difficult decision when they did. Now, they shouldn't have lumped winter sports into it, especially we're seeing with the saliva tests that might possibly become available more readily, where it'll be a lot cheaper, a lot more rapid testing. We still don't know quite how quickly that could be a possibility, but we don't know what the next couple months are going to look like. So we're going to get into Tad Boyle's frustration a little bit there. That part of it seemed to be a little bit premature, but you can criticize Larry Scott and the Pac-12 for a lot of things, and they deserve a lot of criticism. But in this situation, again, how are you going to tell 4 schools in Arizona's been spiking too? I don't know if their gyms are open. I think didn't they have some gyms recently they got in trouble for opening up? So you're talking about a big percentage of the conference right now that can't go into a preseason camp to prepare for a season.
Yeah, I would just say you brought up the point kind of to some degree. I'm not really – I think they are safer in a regimented environment, but unfortunately, again, they're students, so they don't get to stay in that regimented environment every day. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to go out and go to class and hang out with people that aren't being as regimented, and I think that's the issue. It doesn't necessarily matter how they're acting. They're on a college campus with 30,000 other kids who don't care. And that's the issue, is that at some point along the way, it's going to get back to the team through what could possibly be no fault of their own.
Yeah, the frustrating thing about this, Tyler, is the bigger threat to CU student athletes right now is the students that are coming back on campus today.
Right.
More
Exactly.
so than actually competing in sports would be, with
Mhm.
regular testing. And so had all these schools gone to online learning, I think your chances of having a season would have been better, right?
Much higher. Yeah, I would have to agree. Much, much higher. Yes.
All right, we're going to move along, kind of in the same vein. Buy or sell, the Big 12, SEC, and ACC will be able to complete its current plans for a fall football season.
I'm going to buy this, but only because at this point they've made a decision that they're not going to go back on. I don't necessarily agree with the decision, but they're going to deal with the consequences, I think, at this point, especially amongst the group they're getting a lot of praise for this right now, which I think is a little bit surprising in some regard. I guess I just don't see, unless something catastrophic happens, they're not going to switch their decision because it's too late to at this point. I mean, the damage will already have been done, and they're going to ride the wave. And, there's going to be people with positive tests. There's going to be drama. There's going to be conspiracy theories, all that kind of stuff associated with it. But at this point, I think they're just kind of pushed through.
Yeah, I doubt, though, that these three conferences are going to be able to get all the games in that they currently have scheduled right now. That's why when the Pac-12 came out with their schedule, I thought, 10 games is too aggressive. If you had an 8-game situation, again, the FDA just approved this saliva test for coronavirus. We'll see, they say that's cheap, and if that's as efficient as they hope it is, if you had 8 games in there and more flexibility with bye weeks, I think your chances of getting the season in are a lot greater. There's going to be issues with that. There's just not enough bye weeks, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest issue throughout this entire virus situation is that we don't really know, right? I mean, I think the presumption right now is that in the fall, things are going to eventually get worse as people are forced back inside because of the weather. That could not happen. We just don't really know. It's not up to us to determine what's going to happen. And of course, the more people that take it seriously and the more people that follow the guidelines, the better off we'll be. And I kind of hope that's the focus for the next 4 months is, okay, we really did get something taken away that we love. How do we react? Do we complain and bitch and moan about it? Or do we say, okay, that really sucked. It might not be what I want to do or what I think is right, but in order to have football and sports and all these other things in our life, we need to do this to get it over with faster. And I kind of hope that's the approach that everyone takes, because otherwise we're going to be here again in the fall and possibly in the spring too.
Yeah. And I don't think this will come off as too political, but it is frustrating when you look back to mid-March, and that was our real opportunity as a country. And to just completely blow that, it's just so frustrating, for the people. I know you and Amy, me and my family, we took it really seriously early on. And if more people had done that back in March, we wouldn't be in this situation right now. So it kind of pisses me off, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I mean, and it's one of those, I don't really care what you think, right? I mean, not you, just any individual, everybody has their opinion on this, but at the end of the day, there's enough people out there that are making decisions that are going to look out for the entirety of the country. And so if people are concerned overall, these types of decisions are going to continue to be made, whether you agree with them or not. So that's where we're at. And it's not just March. I mean, I think the June issues are even more ridiculous. I mean, we had things to the point where they were getting a lot better, and we decided to take our foot off the gas on it. And, cases, deaths both spiked pretty dramatically in the last 2 months. They're starting to head back down now. And if we had continued that downward trend throughout, we would be in a much better place right now, and we'd be playing football games.
Well, let's shift over to something that's a little bit more positive. Buy or sell, Lawson Lovering will prove to be the best signing of the Tad Boyle era.
Can you clarify something for me?
Sure.
So there's 2 ways to look at this, right? Do you want it to be the most impactful college player?
Yes, correct.
In program history rather than like NBA draft pick?
Yeah, correct. The biggest impact on the CU basketball program.
Right. So then my answer to that would be no. And I think Dinwiddie is still that guy for me in this current moment, because it's just a guard's game. Lawson's always going to depend on other people to get him involved in a college atmosphere. Now, I will say I do feel pretty confident he will be the highest drafted player of the Tadpole era. So I guess kind of half and half answer, but that's just kind of how I see it.
Well, with that footwork and athleticism he showed over the weekend at that AAU event, maybe he can be a 7-foot point guard out there.
Yeah, well, I mean, trust me, there's a lot of positive things that I would say about Lawson Lovering. I do think he's the best player the program has had, but again, I just think the fact that he doesn't play guard, it's going to make it makes it a little more difficult to impact games on your own terms as a big man in college.
It's interesting on the 24/7 Sports Composite. I think right now he's ranked as the 7th all-time commit in terms of rating, but on 24/7 Sports, just our rankings, he'd actually be number 1, slightly ahead of Josh Scott if he holds there at 54, because Scott was 55 nationally by 24/7 Sports.
I think he's going to move up.
Has he gotten reevaluated by rivals in ESPN yet, to your knowledge?
There's not much to reevaluate right now. I mean, they've done a couple tournaments. That footage you saw was from a tournament in Dallas this past weekend. So there was a few things. There were people there. I think typically you don't see a guy move up like 100 spots in the rankings, right? It's usually kind of a gradual progression throughout the year to make sure that they're making the right choice. I think you'll see him continue to move up as the year goes on, even though there's obviously not an evaluation going on right now. I don't know if people realize, though, the player he was guarding him in that clip is a 5-star center. I think his name is Damian Collins. I forget off the top of my head, but he's like ranked 25th in the country. So that's not a scrub that he was going around.
Yeah. All right, let's get into some football topics here. Carl Jarrell had a conference call with the media last week, the day after the Pac-12's announcement that they were postponing the football season. I got to tell you, Tyler, I felt like Carl Jarrell was biting his tongue a lot during that. He kind of paused a few times when asked if he thinks the Pac-12's decision was the right one, and that's understandable. Yeah. Again, that coaching staff worked really hard to put this team in a position, 0 positive tests in the athletic department for 3 weeks. And he even admitted they had some social distancing issues at one point. That was, I want to say that would have been really early summer. And so they put that together and they were doing walkthroughs. They were kind of ramping up for camp. And if it was just the situation the way it is in Colorado right now, they would have been allowed to start camp. Obviously, we talked about some of the issues in the other Pac-12 cities. But did you have any takeaways from that? I definitely sensed some frustration from him.
Yeah, and of course there's going to be, right? I mean, they're obviously a little too close to the situation. You know, that you're always going to be frustrated when you have something taken away from you personally, whether your opinion about it was positive or negative going into it, right? I mean, I think, I talk about this a lot on different podcasts and just in conversations I've had with people. I think football is the toughest to deal with here because there are long-term effects to playing football every year, not just this year. Now, this year, obviously, there's a different element to it, but people play football and coach football knowing that there's long-term risk. That's just part of the game. There has been obviously the concussion discussions for the last 10 years or more have been a big part of the sport. They've made changes to the game in order to get away from all that stuff. So I think just kind of it's built into the DNA of a football player that they'll play through almost anything.
Yeah.
So I think in general, the sport is going to be more against making, health conscious decisions, I guess, at this point. That's just kind of how I view it. I'm sure they're frustrated. We're all frustrated, right? I mean, I don't think anyone is thrilled that that's where we are right now. I think it's the tough thing, the things you don't think about being in a conference, right? We don't get to play based on what Colorado is going through, which has been, especially in the last 3 months, among the best states in the country at handling the virus. A lot of other places are going bananas in some aspect, and Colorado has been very low cases, deaths, all that stuff for a long time now. So it's unfortunate because they've done things the right way, or at least they seem to be doing things the right way. I mean, I think part of the issue that Colorado State story and, North Carolina and Clemson and all those, I'm not sure everyone is going to tell you exactly what's going on inside their program. And I think that's an additional aspect that concerns people. So it's tough because Colorado feels like they have done everything they needed to do, but unfortunately, you can't make a decision based on just that. You have to think about everyone else's situation too.
He doesn't seem to love the idea of a spring football season. Obviously expressed concerns about the wear and tear that would put on players. If you're going to do a spring season, you got to assume you're going to have to shorten the fall season as well. So that'll be interesting to kind of chart going forward. He did mention that Nate Landman and Katie Nixon asked to have private conversations with him. So it's going to be tough even for good players to find landing spots, just because most of those players, most of those programs in those 3 Power 5 leagues that are planning to play right now, you can't imagine there's a ton of open scholarships out there. But, that's something to chart going forward too. It would be a real shame if we don't get to see Nate Landman in a CU uniform again.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be very difficult.
Well, CU had some commits here in recent weeks. Drew Carter, they got their quarterback commit. Kalen Moore from California, Oaks Christian, second year in a row. They've plucked a recruit out of that high school in California. And Joshua Bryan, the number 1 ranked kicker by Chris Taylor, they actually just announced that he is their first ever 6-star prospect. And I'm speaking of Josh Bryan there. I don't know. Chris Taylor, I respect him a lot, but they're getting a little wacky with these rankings now.
Yeah, man. Can't just have the 5-star. Got to do something new and hip.
Well, where does it end? Do we have 10 stars at some point?
Pretty soon, yes, we will, I'm sure.
Well, what are your thoughts there? I think Drew Carter was kind of a polarizing, commit on the board.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely upside potential there. There's no doubt about that. But, yeah, I mean, I think there were guys out there that we liked more. I think I'll be honest. I mean, there's definitely guys out there that I liked more. It's interesting that, we continue to go after other quarterbacks that we hadn't really heard that previous. So I think it does surprise me a little bit that we're going that route. And makes me wonder if that's because we got Carter and we're trying to go after another guy, or if that was the plan all along. Brendan Lewis makes this quarterback class maybe less important, I guess, out of all the other years. You know what I mean? If he's the guy, you can skip a class and not feel too bad about it if he's really the guy. And we'll just have to see how it plays out. But, yeah, I mean, he wasn't the first choice for me.
What makes this tricky is that even if Brendan Lewis is your guy going forward, and you still have a depth issue, right? You've got Sam Neuer going into his senior year. Tyler Lytle's going to be a junior. And so you've got to somehow create some depth in there, no matter how good Brendan Lewis is. And that's a tricky thing because obviously only one guy can get on the field, and every recruit wants to hear that they have a chance to come in and compete. So It's kind of a delicate situation in terms of, bringing these guys in. If they do bring in 2 guys. Now, I would think it would be interesting if Mike Chandler II, the walk-on, comes in and he's legit. Then all of a sudden your concern isn't as high there, because he would be a guy that on film kind of almost looks like he's scholarship caliber.
Yeah, I don't really know the answer to this, but has the plan all along been to put him in the quarterback room, or are they trying to use him in a little more of an athlete role, or is it just one of those we'll have to wait and see?
I think he's going to get a legit chance at quarterback, yeah. Okay. Now, obviously, you're going to tell a recruit and parents what they want to hear during the recruiting process, but Carl Durrell and his staff have seemingly been pretty honest, and they've been pretty adamant, and they recruited the heck out of Mike Chandler II. You don't often hear of coaching staffs having hour-long conversations with walk-on candidates. So they put a lot of work in, because he did have New Mexico after him, both for football and basketball. I think he's a guy, if he had gone to Lamar Junior College, could have possibly blown up. So it's kind of a coup for CU to get him as a walk-on. And we usually don't even pay that close of attention to walk-ons. That's how good he looks on film.
Yeah, the whole process was kind of surprising to me. I mean, is it just that he's undersized? Because it's not like he played at a school that there wasn't a lot of eyeballs on him. So it's not really like you should have fallen under the radar.
Yeah, I had a conversation with his dad, and it was confusing to them. Now, recruiting can often be a copycat situation, right? What happens if Mike Chandler II gets a Power 5 option early on in the process? Does that change how other schools view him and evaluate him? you see that happen with a lot of guys. So it's hard to say. He's definitely on the shorter end, but he led 2 different high schools to district championships, was a unanimous district player of the year, really good basketball player, good athlete. So I'm anxious to see and hear more about him in the future. But yeah, it sounds like CU could potentially take another high school quarterback. Danny Langsdorf told Maddox Kopp that, hey, I'm still going to recruit you as hard as I was before Drew Carter committed. But it looks like with him in particular, either Ole Miss or Houston is most likely where he's going to go. Those 2 schools don't have a quarterback commit yet. But, yeah, you've got Cameron Friel that's committed to UNLV right now that I'm sure they're still going to keep recruiting. So that'll be interesting to see. But it's going to be really hard, I think, to flip Friel now that you've already got a quarterback on board.
Right, yeah, that's why I guess if you're going to take 2, I'm surprised they got Carter on board so early because of that type of situation. But, I mean, I guess you got to take one. You can't wait forever.
Caleb Elam's-Orr appears to be down to Colorado and Cal. He's a top 20 recruit in California by 24/7 Sports. Obviously, Brian Michalowski landed a big pass rusher last recruiting cycle in Jason Harris. If he can get Elam's-Orr on there, then he's done as good a job as any recruiter on the staff the last couple of years.
For sure. It would, one time is one time, but 2 years in a row, that's more of a trend. So, yeah, you would have to start giving him a lot of credit, more than he even gets, I think, for what he's done, because I think that's a position that changes programs. I mean, if you have legitimate pass rushers year in and year out, you have a pretty good chance to win football games and create some havoc.
It's an interesting dynamic, too, there with Cal. Obviously, it's close to home. His mom went there, but they've got a couple outside linebackers on board already as commits, actually, both guys that CU went after as well. So that'll be an interesting battle to watch going forward. You ready for another discussion on Antonio Alfano, Tyler?
Sure.
We hear he's working his way into back into the good graces of CU football. CU Student of the Week.
The staff, though, right? I mean, we all saw the players' reactions to that, right? Yeah. I mean, we can't ignore that.
No. So I'd still temper expectations for folks out there.
Absolutely.
If somebody hasn't shown over the course of time that they can be consistent, show up every day, work hard. But, I mean, he was the number 1 ranked recruit in the entire country in 2019. So as long as he's still within, the realm of possibly playing for the Buffs, it's something we're going to have to keep talking about.
That's up to you, my guy. I just show up to these podcasts. If you want to talk about Antonio Alfano, I'll be glad to. But I think I've made my position fairly clear on the subject.
Fair enough. Well, you participated in our top 30 Buffs countdown. How'd you feel like that turned out? No surprise at the top. Nate Lamb, the unanimous pick there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we all have disagreements, which I think that's good, right? I mean, I think you want to have people that have differing opinions. There were a couple guys that were a little lower or higher than I would have said maybe. But overall, I think because of the averages, it works out. I don't think there was anybody egregiously over or underranked. Now, we know that's going to be wrong. I mean, someone will end up way too high on the list and way too low. They always do. But, yeah, I mean, I think it was a good collection. And overall, I think it reminds you that we have some elite younger pieces for sure, but maybe not that senior leadership that you would want to see in a year that's – it's a transition year, right? So, yes, I think the team overall has responded very well to that and handled it with a lot of grace and maturity. But still, it's a little bit easier sometimes when you have a 25-person senior class there that can really right the ship because the coaches can't be there all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt overall with this list there was better depth than we've had some years, but not quite as much maybe, top-end NFL-type talent at the top of the list. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of my main reaction to our list. Rest in peace, Betty Hoover and Herb Orvis. Buffs lost a couple great ones here in recent weeks. Obviously, everybody knows Betty and Peggy, the twins, and there's just their overwhelming spirit that they show and just how incredible they've been at supporting the program. I think it was on your Free Balling podcast, Tyler, somebody said something along the lines of, yeah, she was 95, lived a great life, but maybe there's just some people that deserve to live forever. And I think –
yeah, that was me. Yeah, and it's, you have to celebrate, obviously, someone who makes it 95 years. That's special, but at the same time, I do feel that way. There are some people that just don't deserve to be taken off the planet ever. And both her and her twin sister, obviously, are in that category. I don't always approach life with that same happiness and positive attitude. So every time I see them, it's a nice reminder of there are other ways, it's okay to be a little bit happier. Like, you don't have to be frustrated every time something goes wrong. Like, you're out here as a fan. And I always, like, every year I feel like I try to find myself trying to be a little more positive and a little more supportive and all of that, because at the end of the day, that really does lift kids up. And, they're college kids, we all want to win. We all want to be perfect. That's not realistic though. And even when things go bad, having the positive outlook on life that they always did. Show up at every game. I think Ryan Koenigsberg had a picture on Twitter about those two were at the Auburn game when we were a part of the 24-hour tip-off marathon with ESPN until like 1 o'clock in the morning. Like, that's kind of stuff. You just don't see that. Like, they'll be a part of the program for 50 more years because of what they meant. There are people on campus who know who those two are, but couldn't tell you what the coach's name is.
Yeah. I think there's a movement on Twitter, right, to try to get them a statue somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. They should. And I saw someone also said that they should be put into the CU Sports Hall of Fame, which I agree with 100% as well. That would be amazing.
Yeah. Herb Orvis, he was CU's all-time leader in sacks when he exhausted his eligibility, College Football Hall of Famer. Long battle with Parkinson's disease touches home with me. That's something my father's been battling, and it's just brutal what that does to folks. And so, hopefully he's in a better place. But we did a CU all-time draft here recently, and he was an early pick from me. He was a guy – back in those days, you didn't have the huge sack numbers that you started to see. And so he was an incredible player back in his day. At 6'5", back in his era, he was kind of a giant out there.
Yeah, not kind of a giant. He was absolutely a giant. Different size man for someone who played that long ago. Obviously, as a younger guy and someone who didn't get into CU until college, I never got to see much of him. I met him one time at a CU event. He was a really nice guy. But, it's crazy. I feel like it's been a bad 5 or 10 year stretch for Colorado, not just the last couple of weeks. We've lost some big names. And, I'm getting to that age now where, of course, that happens more often, and maybe I'm just not used to it. There's probably, you get to this point where people start going every single year once you get into adulthood. So I'm sure I'll get more used to it. But it does feel like a bad stretch.
Herb Orvis, you mentioned him being a great guy. I remember when he was getting announced as an inductee to the College Football Hall of Fame, he had to do a press conference at CU, and he was almost kind of had this like humble demeanor, too much so, like he didn't deserve it or anything. He was just that type of guy. So hopefully he's in a better place here.
He was definitely very unassuming.
Yeah.
Like, if you just met him on the street, you would never know that he was a College Football Hall of Famer.
Played 10 years in the NFL. Yeah. Right. Well, it's the 10-year anniversary of 24/7 Sports, so we're running a promo on BuffStampede.com. You can get 50% off an annual subscription. There's still recruiting to cheer for. There's not games, unfortunately, this fall, but we're still going to be on top of the recruiting coverage. So if you haven't given us a try before, this is a great opportunity. If you can go in to iTunes and rate this podcast, that helps get this in front of more CU fans. And Tyler, hopefully they're subscribing to the Free Ball and Pod as well. You guys have been a little bit more active with that recently. Kind of break down your plans with that podcast going forward.
Yeah, we're trying. Obviously it's a tough time to be active with podcasts, but we're trying. We recently started a Patreon, so now there's people that can subscribe to the podcast. So we definitely we owe it to those people, obviously, to keep things going. So I think right now our current project is we're doing a lot of flash pods, which is basically a shorter version of a podcast. Right now we're going through all of the incoming basketball recruits. We were in the process of trying to go through all the football recruits leading up to the season. But of course, now that the year is canceled, we'll have to decide if we want to push those out a little bit more. We're just going to talk about, how this affects us, and just keep trying to stay active in the sports community, try to get creative and do some different things to entertain people, I think. And, ultimately for us, it's fun. It's not going to be a lifestyle or a job for any of us. We're just out there trying to be good CU fans and have good conversations and meet people through it. So that's really all we're looking for.
Definitely recommend listening to the Tad Boyle era draft. That was a fun show you guys did, and enjoy the one about Askia Booker. I was very critical of him when he didn't show up to support his teammates in that CBI game, but enough time has passed now that I think hopefully people can look at more of the positives of his career at CU, and you guys touched on that quite a bit.
For sure, and I think I especially feel that way. I mean, I was definitely tougher on him when he was here. But yeah, I think, again, these things that you learn as you get older, you're always going to look back on those memories with positive thoughts, right? I mean, I think that's really what stands out as time goes on. So yeah, I definitely have a lot more fond memories of Askia now.
Let's jump into the Buff Stampede mailbag. Buffin asked, does the football program use the new time off to fit in another heavy strength cycle similar to winter off season? What do you think the odds are of an NFL season? So on the heavy strength cycle, I would think that's most likely. Now, I asked Carl Jarrell what their plan is going forward. I think part of the problem is they don't know quite what's going to be allowed. Right now, they do have those 20 hours, but they're not able to get out there and put pads on, obviously. So I think it would be kind of tailored around that. They're hoping, both Rick George and Carl Jarrell, is that they'll be able to maybe have spring practices in the fall, kind of that setup somewhere along the lines of 15 practices, maybe being able to do a scrimmage. If they're able to do that, then that's going to obviously change what they do in the weight room and kind of the timetable there. So it's yet to be determined really at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the interesting thing about everyone's worried about how it's going to break down students' bodies. Well, they didn't have spring ball. So, I mean, they're definitely well rested. And if you take away a little bit of practice time and play more games, ultimately you're going to be doing the same amount of strenuous work. They just have to be creative about it. Do they need to play 32 games in a year? No, they obviously don't need to do that. But I do think there are ways you can get it done. I kind of look at it as you have to sort of pretend like the entire team is coming back from injury. A guy's out for the year. What's the year-long process? How do you get them ready to go for the next time they're going to be ready to play? What's that long-term outlook? I think that's probably – I don't know anything about working out. I haven't done it since I was young. I'm not going to sit here and lie. Coach Wilson, I'm sure, has a way better idea of what's going to happen. But to me, that's the outlook that I initially thought of. Okay, the team's all injured. We have 5 months to get them back healthy. What's the regimen that you're going to put in place?
Yeah, I do think now that these regular students are back on campus, you're probably going to want to stick with smaller groups, right, to work out, because otherwise you could see real issues with a whole team-wide breakout. Yeah, we'll see. In terms of the NFL, I mean, it definitely seems like the season's going to start, and then it kind of all depends on, is there this massive second spike in the country? But there's so much money at stake there, and it's a different thing. You can have these guys opt out, replace them, and it's an apples to oranges comparison, obviously, with college football.
Yeah, and I think NFL will happen for the same reason I answered before about the other conferences that are playing. They'll deal with the consequences. They're always the only game in town. I feel like they'll be even more so this year. And I think sports are doable, but the fan aspect is the concern for me. I would be surprised and disappointed if they allow fans into the stadiums. That's where the line is drawn for me, I think, at this point. Obviously, it hurts the bottom line, but the NFL is much more viable, obviously, in a bubble situation, which isn't doable like the NFL or the NBA and NHL are doing. So in order to make it work, you're going to have to be around as few people as possible throughout the process, and I think that's part of it. But I would be absolutely shocked at this point if the NFL doesn't finish the year.
I do think I'm going to have to go through Twitter and unfollow everybody that covers the Broncos, because every time I see a practice update, it makes me a little teary-eyed. It's tough to see that. I miss football so much.
Yeah, you don't get practice updates though anyway, so.
At least we, are interviewing with guys and gearing up to cover a season. So
maybe you got an entire year to work on Carl. see if we can get that switched up.
All right. Along the lines of the last question, Optimus Prime Buff asked, I would like to know how Coach Wilson is going to keep the players focused on training and staying in shape. It has to be especially hard not knowing if there will be football next spring or maybe not until the fall of 2021. Are the coaches limited in terms of how much time they can spend with players from everything from lifting, academic work, counseling, etc.? So that 20-hour rule breaks down to working out. I don't know if that includes counseling. That might be a separate allotment of time there. But yeah, right now I think about 20 hours. They were doing walkthroughs. They're kind of dialing back from that because there's no camp to prepare for. So we kind of touched on the Coach Wilson stuff. I mean, that's his job, right, to motivate these guys. And so he's been put in a bad situation as every strength coach has here since March. But he seems to be doing a pretty good job of it. And so, yeah, I think they will do as much as they possibly can, especially if the numbers stay lower here in Colorado. GA Buff asked, Boulder can get a ton of snow in the spring. How would the athletic department manage that for spring football? So that's a good thing about football, right, is you can play in snow.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be cold. Wear a jacket. There's not much you can do. Obviously, the groundskeeping crew at Folsom is among the best. In terms of practice, obviously we have the indoor practice facility, so that's not a huge issue there. But yeah, on game day, I mean, I do feel like the last couple of falls, there's been some crazy weather. I remember a pretty big snowstorm. I remember a couple huge rainstorms during games. One of the games, it was like 1,000,000 degrees. Another one, it was like 30. So the weather can get pretty volatile. Anyways, yeah, the spring is a little bit more so for sure. But I think if we get to play in the spring, every game will be sold out and people will show up in whatever weather there is because they'll be missing football big time.
Yeah, there's things that could prevent there from being a spring football season, but weather's not going to be it.
No.
Optimist Prime Buff asked for updates on Cherry Creek recruits Al Ashford and Arthur Walker, or Arden Walker, I should say. Arthur is his father. I'm going to have a new update on Ashford coming your way pretty soon. Walker, it sounds like Texas might have the lead in his recruitment right now, but he hasn't been able to get out there to Austin because of the dead period. CU's definitely still in the mix there. I wouldn't write that off completely, but yeah, we'll see. Ashford, I mean, if he takes too much longer, they're going to fill up. They've already got quite a few DBs on board.
Yeah, we'll just have to see. It would be, Creek has been a big pipeline for us, so hopefully we can find a way. Both of those two are kind of right on the cusp. Arden, we saw at camp last summer. Was that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And feels like 10 years ago, but
yeah. Yeah. And we liked him quite a bit. There was some other guys there that we didn't like as much and that we haven't recruited in Colorado. We've since seen them fall down the rankings a bit. I don't think he's a surefire starter at the next level, but I think he's a guy that you definitely want to take a chance on. Obviously, he's a legacy commit too. So, they might not like everything that he has in terms of size. I feel like that's the biggest issue is they feel like he's a bit of a tweener, but yeah, it does seem like in recent weeks they've started to pump up the volume on him a little bit, I guess you would say, and we'll see if we can find a way to get it done. You've
seen most college football programs, it seems like, go to more of a three-man front because it allows for more versatility. But if I was Arden Walker, I might try to seek out an opportunity if I can get a Power 5 school that runs a four-man front. I think he would fit in a little bit better as a traditional defensive end, to your point there.
Yeah.
Optimus Prime Buff also asked, are the Broncos going to do the right thing and reward Philip Lindsay with a new and much bigger contract? Does John Elway have the final say regarding a new contract for Philip? So, Tyler, you follow the NFL closer than me. It's pretty rare for an NFL team to pay a player until they have to, right?
Yeah, again, this probably isn't a question for me and you, but I'll do my best with it. I'm not a Broncos guy either. What I would say is they didn't bring in Melvin Gordon for nothing. They obviously want to have somebody else in that room. I think they definitely should pay Phil, but also he's a running back in the NFL who's undersized. So I'm not necessarily I'm not sure they will pay Phil, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. That will piss off the fans, but that's just kind of how the NFL goes. I will be interested to see how they use him and Melvin Gordon this year, because I think if he's a legitimate backup, that's going to go poorly. I don't see how that works. And, Melvin Gordon is a fantastic player. He has a lot of health issues, so we'll have to see if he stays healthy. But they can use both of those guys next to each other, tag team, however you want to do it. But, yeah, I think Phil has earned a paycheck, but that's just not how the NFL works. The NFL only pay, you better be good while your contract is up. That's the only chance you're going to get.
Yeah, and he's going to be a restricted free agent after this coming season, so they can match offers there. So there was never a point where, they had to pay him right now again. And Pat Shurmur, I'm not a Broncos insider either, but their new offense coordinator, it sounds like he really likes running backs that can catch the ball in the backfield. And so if Phil can show that he can do really well in that area, I know I saw one of the interviews at the very end of last season. Philip Lindsay said that was a top priority for him going in the offseason, was to get better as a receiver out of the backfield. If he can do that, if it doesn't happen with the Broncos, somebody's going to pay him eventually if he keeps putting together the yards per carry average that he's been putting together.
Well, there's no doubt he'll get a second contract. I just think the issue is even the very best running backs in the NFL don't get paid, or at least not what they deserve. It's a position that, for whatever reason, the NFL has decided is replaceable. And obviously he's a guy at his size that he's never going to be an every down back, at least not in the way that some guys are. So his salary potential is somewhat limited. I mean, he was an undrafted free agent, so he's going to get a second contract and obviously do way better than 95% of people in the NFL thought he could ever dream of. He will get paid, but yeah, I mean, he's not going to get $8 to $10 million a year.
Yeah, I will say I'm not a huge NFL guy, but I've enjoyed watching the Broncos about 10 times as much as I used to with Philip Lindsay on there. So from a feel-good standpoint, hopefully it works itself out long-term, because it would suck to see him suit up in another NFL jersey.
Unless it's the Browns.
Natty Zaddy asked, if you had one cuisine to eat for the rest of your life, what would it be?
All right, so I always am curious. Is cuisine, are we talking like style of food, or are we talking one specific item?
I take cuisine to be broader, to be, a style of food.
Yeah. So to me, Italian is probably what I would go off for the rest of my life. Yeah, big fan.
I think from a taste standpoint, I 100% agree with you. Give me all the pasta, ravioli, penne bolognese, seafood, pasta, love it all. I feel like my lifespan is going to be pretty short, though, if I'm eating Italian food for every meal.
I don't know, man. Those Italians are pretty old out there. They're doing something right. We just have to de-Americanize it.
Okay. I think, though, if this was a real-life scenario for where I am right now here in Colorado, I'd pick Mexican just because between tacos and, burrito bowls, you could actually find a nice variety. You probably wouldn't get sick of it that quick like you would a lot of foods. And then, you can make it healthy. You can put guacamole on there and veggies. Right. And I'm hoping to live a little longer than Italian-only cuisine. I feel like – but taste-wise, no question.
I'll readily admit that. Well, so I don't eat cheese anymore. So 3 years ago, if you had asked me, I would have said Mexican for sure. I mean, obviously it's still good without cheese, but there's a few obvious items that I can no longer eat that make it not worth my time. I would just be torturing myself if I could only eat Mexican for the rest of my life at this point.
I could eat carne asada, street tacos, like for every meal every day.
Yeah.
All right. Shy and DeBuff asked, in general, as you speak to football questions on canceling the football season, it'd be nice if you layer in the basketball side of recent events too. So the basketball program has had 0 positive tests since the majority of their scholarship athletes returned to campus in early June. McKinley Wright was training in Arizona, and then Tristan Da Silva has not been able to make it over from Germany yet. So on the football side, we talked a little about this a little bit earlier. I get Tad Boyle's frustration as to why do they have to get lumped in with this football announcement right now, because we don't know what it's going to look like in 2 months from now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's definitely – among like all the other COVID stuff, of course it's arbitrary because we're all guessing, but this feels especially arbitrary. They're just like, oh, January, we can start talking about stuff again. Well, how do you know January is going to be any better than November or April? Or, we don't know. I think the problem is, of course, the general consensus, we talked about this earlier too, is that the fall is going to get worse. So why are they going to even try to play in November when things are bad now? we think down the line they're going to get worse, right? But, we canceled March Madness 4 days in advance. You can do the same thing for the start of basketball season too. There's really, in my opinion, no reason to make this decision so far leading up to the season. Now, if you had asked me, do I think they would be able to start college basketball in November, my answer would have been no. But play it out and let's see. Maybe someone will change their mind and we can actually have a plan and make some of this possible. But yeah, I was surprised to see it canceled through January.
What you really hope is Bill Self and KU are still going to come to the CU Event Center sometime soon, because that would have been a fun day there. But if this saliva testing is as cheap as they say it is, and it proves to be pretty efficient, it's going to be easier with basketball than it would football, just from the sheer number of athletes that compete, I would feel like.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's more difficult fan-wise because obviously you're playing indoors, which is definitely not the approach that you want. I don't know the ins and outs of Coors Event Center's ventilation system, but based on experience, it's not great. So I would say that would be difficult.
Do you remember the day where they gave out free bacon?
Yes.
And the entire arena just had bacon scent.
Yeah.
I hadn't eaten breakfast that day. That was torture.
Yeah, as soon as 25 people show up, it's already hot in there. I mean,
yeah.
I'm not sure that's a place where you want fans if there are issues with the virus. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like as time goes on, I get more and more. I feel bad for McKinley Wright, who would have been and still is hopefully going to be one of the most revered Colorado basketball players ever. And by the time he's done, he's going to have an entire season taken away from him. Stats, records, all that kind of stuff, just in terms of legacy. I mean, he would have made the NCAA tournament, but it's not going to say that on his resume when things are done.
Yeah. Shia Buff also asked, how do you see the rest of the CU basketball recruiting class building out? Where do you see the young roster / commits fitting in? So right now they do have 2 commits for 2021, both 4-star guys, Lawson Lovering and Quincy Allen. And they're going to sign at least 3 more guys for the following season. What would that be, 2021-22 season? Mm-hmm. So there's quite a few guys out there that are still kind of looking at CU. Javon Ruffin, he's a combo guard from New Orleans. His dad played in the NBA. He's part of the Pelicans organization.
Is his dad Michael Ruffin?
Yes.
Oh,
yep.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. Keep an eye on French guard Adama Bowl. Hopefully I pronounced his name right. He might opt to play professionally, though, so we'll see there. Obina Onyanwu, a 4-star prospect from California. I'm going to do a more in-depth dive on kind of where things look with CU men's basketball, so kind of tease it a little bit there. But now your expectations are kind of running wild, I would think, with these 2 guys on committed right now.
Yes, and in terms of where the class is going to go, they asked 5 spots. So I think the most obvious answer is they'll probably try to get a guy to play each position, or at least, someone that fits into that mold. You always need a point guard. I'll tell you in every single class, and that you need a point guard in your class. So they need that. You need that floor general, someone who can get, especially Lawson Lovering, who's a big man, got to be able to find a way to get him the ball in the post. So. A 5-man class in college is huge. You don't see that very often. That's pretty unusual. I don't know. Maybe they won't even take 5 guys. We'll have to see, because you do want to kind of spread it out a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think the options are out there, right? At this point, I mean, they have 2 electric commits. They're typically success breeds success. So there's going to be kids around the country like, oh, I want to play with those 2 guys.
Yeah, you want this to be the best shooting class that Tad Boyle's had. It's trending in that direction. That's a fun thing to put in Quincy Allen's film and just watch him stroke it, because I think if there's one strong criticism of Tad Boyle recruiting, it's been that he's gone for versatility and athleticism no more than shooters. And Lovering, as a 7-footer, can shoot it too. So that's the part that I want to see them get one more shooter in this class and really have that no longer be a major criticism of Tad Boyle. McKinley Wright, you mentioned he pulled out of the NBA draft. What are your thoughts on him? He was training out in Arizona, especially with the season getting postponed. That's not a big deal from a team continuity standpoint, because I believe obviously he's out in Boulder now.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, I think that he was never going to the NBA this year. He's just not that type of player, at least not at this point in his career. He's going to have to become a better shooter if he wants to take that next step to the NBA level. So I think no real surprise that he's coming back, but obviously it's huge for the program. I mean, he's massive. He's the biggest thing that we've got right now and one of the best CU players ever. So, I mean, he's a great college guard and he has a chance to improve. Yeah, we'll have to see. I hope his senior season somehow gets everything he deserves because, man, he deserves a lot more than he's gotten in the past year or so. And we'll just have to see how it plays out. But, yeah, I mean, I think this team has a chance to be pretty solid at the very least if things do get to the point where we can play this year.
Evan Batty was selected to a group of basketball players. It's a group of players that they're going to meet and provide feedback on college basketball issues. Can't think of a better representative for a panel like that.
Absolutely. I mean, regardless of what his basketball career does for him, I mean, I can't wait to see what he does in life because Evan Batty is a extremely special kid and he's going to change the world in some way for sure.
And him and McKinley already have, a back and forth going as to who's going to coach the Buffs in the future.
Yeah. All
right. Before we sign off with this show, we're going to do a few off-topic subjects here. We're going to have to sprinkle in this stuff because obviously with less football to talk about with no season, it's going to be a little bit challenging. Going to have to get creative with it here. Tyler, you're a big movie guy.
Yeah.
And somebody that we know is that Will used to criticize you that you like really bad movies.
Tyler Murray. Tyler Murray. Okay. Tyler Murray loves to hate on how terrible. I'll watch anything. I'm not going to sit here and deny that. I mean, I could watch almost anything, but.
All right. So we're going to give each other our top 3 movies that we like that are not very critically acclaimed, I guess, favorite bad movies in air quotes.
Yeah.
What do you got?
I don't know if any of these are bad. And I told you off air, I don't know if any of these are critically acclaimed because like I said, I'll watch anything. So I don't pay attention to that stuff.
Okay.
The first one for me is the John Wick series.
Okay.
Incredible. Keanu Reeves. I don't think any of the 3 made that much money, but especially the first one got like nothing in theaters. I feel like it has kind of a cult following now, but unbelievable series.
All right. I'm going to say The Internship with Vince Vaughn, Owen Wilson. Randomly, that'll be on the guide on the TV, and that's one of those movies that I think it was – I wrote down it had a 34% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. I don't know. It's like it does its job as a comedy. It makes me laugh, so I like that one.
Yeah, I like that we're taking different approaches to this because I don't know what any of these are on Rotten Tomatoes. Okay. Kingsman. Which there's been a couple of those in the last few years. Super entertaining, mildly funny, just like mindless, great entertainment.
All right. I haven't seen any of these yet, so I'm going to have to put them on my list.
You never saw John Wick?
I did not.
Oh,
no.
Bro.
All right. Passengers with Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence only had a 31 critic score. Kind of an original plot line. I don't know. That had me hooked. I mean, It was a real dick move by Chris Pratt to wake her up, but
yes, I enjoyed that movie as well. I didn't realize that didn't get good reviews. I feel like it made a ton of money.
Okay.
So I don't know, but I don't know if that's true, but I feel like everybody was going to see that at the time. I have a couple extra ones too, so we'll see what we get there. You can tell me whether or not these are critically acclaimed or not. My next one is Madagascar, which is one of my favorite cartoon, however you want to describe that, movies of all time. Pure entertainment.
With 3 young kids, there's like this varying degree of how annoying animated movies are, and that's not annoying. So that's a big winner right there.
I'm a big Disney and cartoon guy, so all like you could put Ice Age in there, all that stuff. I love all those kind of movies.
Okay. Get Hard with Will Ferrell and Kevin Hart. Those 2 guys by themselves can sometimes be too much, but something about that chemistry in that movie had me laughing quite a bit. Only a 28% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes.
I feel like you're in the genre. One I almost put on there was Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates. Did you see that movie?
No.
Oh, man. It's like similarly stupid comedy that I somehow enjoyed. Pretty awesome.
One that I was going to put on this list, but actually has a higher score on Rotten Tomatoes than I thought is Keanu. Did you ever see that?
No.
with Key and Peele. You put that on your list. It's fun.
Okay, I'll watch that. All right, so the last one that I had on here, and I'm sure it must have been critically acclaimed, but I feel like no one ever talks about it, is American History X, which is one of my favorite movies ever, but I don't have any idea if other people agree with that or not.
I think that's pretty highly acclaimed. Okay.
Yeah, that's why I left it for the end.
Okay. All right, next up, I want to get your top burger joints in Colorado, Tyler. I shared mine recently on Twitter. Mine are the Jiffy Burger at the Dark Horse in Boulder and the jalapeno cream cheese burger at my brother's bar in Denver. Those are 1A, 1B in my book.
Yeah, so those are two that you have to obviously discuss for sure. I mean, those are definitely the two that are up there. I mean, I think the Sink in Boulder has a good burger as well. There's good burgers everywhere, although I will readily admit I'm not going to get a burger in most places I go.
Okay.
The one place that I do always get one right now is Sloan's and Highland Tap and Burger. There's multiple locations, whichever one you want to go to. They have great burgers. The one that I usually get is the Tap Burger. It's got onion rings, pulled pork. It's great stuff.
Okay. Cherry Cricket's obviously famous for a reason. They've got good burgers there. Lark Burger I like in Boulder. I think that's a Colorado specific thing. I was trying to kind of keep it more towards Colorado only places. Mountain Sun in Boulder has good burgers. Bud's Bar in
that's a good one.
Where's that located?
Sedalia. Yeah, great.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of people were hitting that up on my mentions, and so I'm gonna have to try that.
Oh, you haven't been? It is very good. They don't do fries there, which is personally slight for me, but it's just kind of their thing. They do potato chips. Got to get potato chips with your burger, but it is awesome.
Steuben's in Denver was just recently picked, and I forget the publication. I haven't tried their burger yet, so I'm gonna have to try that.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had lunch there. I always get brunch, breakfast food.
So you're back into sports cards. What's going on there, Tyler?
Well, I'm bored. I don't have a job, for one, which is not a good time to get into sports cards because it's expensive. And I basically have to tell myself like every day that I can't go buy more things. But I love it. I've been trying to get them from my parents' house for a couple of years now, so it's not just the break that has caused me to do this, but the break did allow me to go to New York to go get them and look through everything. And it took about 4 seconds before I was like, wow, this is incredible. And it's not only the expensive stuff where you get the autographs or whatever, but there's a lot, especially for me, because I have a ton of stuff from my childhood, that era, where you're just like looking at cards of guys that you grew up watching and loved. And I have a ton of Indians and Cavs and Browns stuff. It's like, oh man, you forgot about this guy or this guy. It brings back a lot of good memories from my childhood.
Yeah, I was into sports cards when I was like early teenager, so like would have been like 93 to 97. And it's kind of frustrating that you look back at all the cards you thought were going to be worth so much money back then, but the market was just saturated back then. There were so many sports cards being produced then. So I don't know if I have any that are that valuable, but I was texting you yesterday that my father-in-law has a Hank Aaron rookie card. So we're going to have to.
And I looked it up. It's the number one most rare Hank Aaron card. Okay. So if it's in good shape, that thing is going to get a hefty payday.
Yeah. All right, Tyler. Well, it was good catching up. We'll check in with each other here hopefully soon. And again, make sure you are subscribing to the Free Ballin' Pod. Go on there, rate and review both of our podcasts. And hopefully we have some optimistic news to talk about at some point in the near future because, man, this has been a rough 6 months.
For sure. Otherwise, this is going to be a golf podcast pretty soon.
I'm down with that. All right, Tyler. Thanks for joining me, and thanks to all of you for tuning in.
No problem. Glad to be on.